The morning began like any other, but there was a strange tension in the air that Amina could not place. The sunlight had just started to spill into the living room, highlighting the scattered books and coffee mugs she had left from the previous night. She sipped her tea slowly, enjoying the quiet, relishing the rare moment when the house seemed hers alone. That peace shattered the instant she heard the lock turn. Her heart skipped a beat. That sound was not normal. Roth had left for work hours ago, and she wasn't expecting anyone. She froze on the sofa, gripping her mug as if it could shield her from the sudden intruder. The door creaked open, and there she was. Shamim, her mother-in-law, standing in the doorway with a calm yet commanding presence that made the room feel smaller, tighter, and somehow suffocating. Shamim's eyes swept the room with a judgmental intensity. She didn't greet Amina. She didn't ask for permission. She just entered as though the house and its inhabitant belonged to her. "So," Shamim began, her voice casual but sharp, "still lazing around every day? No wonder my son is overworked." The words hit Amina like a punch to the stomach. Sharp, precise, deliberate. It wasn't just criticism. It was an accusation. A claim that she had somehow failed to do what was expected of her. She tried to swallow the lump forming in her throat, tried to steady her breath, but the humiliation coursed through her veins. She had always endured Shamim's disapproval quietly, but this uninvited intrusion, this public inspection of her private life, was different. Amina looked around nervously, noting the judgment in Shamim's gaze. Every unwashed cup, every cushion out of place, every speck of dust on the floor became a reason for scrutiny. "If I don't check, who will?" Shamim said, crossing her arms. "Clearly, someone needs to keep you on track." It was more than just an annoyance. It was an invasion. Shamim had never been subtle, but today Amina realized this was personal. There was a reason behind the unannounced visit, and Amina's instincts told her it wasn't just concern over household chores. Her thoughts drifted involuntarily to Roth. She had discovered his betrayal only days ago, a truth that had left her shaken. Late-night messages, secretive calls, unexplained excuses. He had assumed she wouldn't notice, that she would remain oblivious, that her silence would be her surrender. But she had noticed everything. Every word, every pause, every hidden intention. The anger flared hot in her chest, but beneath it, a cold determination began to take shape. This wasn't just about household chores or the judgmental gaze of a mother-in-law. This was about betrayal, about someone trying to manipulate the narrative and shift the blame. Shamim's intrusion, Amina realized, was an extension of that betrayal. It wasn't happening by accident. It was orchestrated. Amina gripped her mug tightly, feeling the warmth seep into her palms, anchoring her in the moment. She had always been quiet, always tried to keep the peace, but something inside her snapped. Today, she wouldn't remain silent. Today, she wouldn't let herself be made small by lies and assumptions. Shamim moved further into the room, her gaze sweeping from one corner to the other, as if she was auditing the space, looking for evidence of laziness or incompetence. Amina followed her movements carefully, noting every smirk, every subtle shake of the head. Shamim wasn't just judging her. She was performing, projecting an image of authority that made everyone in the room feel inferior. "You really should be more responsible," Shamim continued, her voice light but cutting. "Rolf works so hard and you just sit around. Someone has to make sure things run smoothly here." Amina's chest tightened. It was true that she hadn't been as energetic as before, but it wasn't laziness that slowed her down. It was the weight of betrayal, the exhaustion of carrying emotional wounds in silence, and the pressure of trying to maintain a life that had suddenly started to feel fragile. She wanted to shout, to defend herself, to tell Shamim that she was not the problem. But she stayed quiet, letting the simmering anger grow as Shamim moved toward the kitchen, inspecting the dishes, the living room, the tiny messes that anyone else might overlook. Amina's mind raced. She thought about all the times she had endured criticism, the small humiliations that had piled up over the years. But now, with the added sting of Rolf's betrayal, it all converged into a single point of clarity. This wasn't just about her being lazy. This was about truth, control, and justice. Her gaze hardened as she realized what needed to be done. Shamim's intrusion, while infuriating, had given her a glimpse of the bigger picture. If she wanted to reclaim her life, she had to confront the lies, expose the truth, and make those responsible face the consequences of their actions. It wouldn't be easy. Revenge, if she chose to pursue it, would demand patience, precision, and courage. But the thought of letting Rolf's betrayal slide, of letting Shamim's judgment stand unchallenged, was unbearable. Amina's anger slowly transformed into focus. She began to formulate a plan, silently in her mind. Every late-night message from Rolf, every excuse he had made, every hidden meeting, she would gather evidence. Every judgmental word from Shamim, every unannounced visit, would fuel her determination. She would not act recklessly. She would not seek revenge blindly. She would strike with clarity, with precision, and above all, with the purpose of reclaiming her dignity. As Shamim finally settled into a chair, apparently satisfied with her inspection, Amina kept her eyes on her. She said nothing, but the promise she had made to herself burned brighter than ever. She would not be humiliated silently. She would not allow deceit to control her life. She would fight back, but not recklessly. She would wait, observe, and then act when the moment was right. The tension in the room was palpable, though unspoken. Shamim continued speaking, lecturing quietly about responsibility, about discipline, about the need to change. Amina listened, nodding occasionally, her mind elsewhere, spinning threads of strategy and resolve. She realized that anger alone was not enough. It needed to be channeled, focused, sharpened into something that could not be ignored. By the time Shamim left, leaving the door slightly ajar, Amina felt a strange mixture of relief and anticipation. Relief that the immediate intrusion was over, anticipation for the path that lay ahead. She had crossed a threshold. The betrayal had ignited something deep inside her, something that demanded action, demanded truth, demanded justice. She walked to the window, watching Shamim's retreating figure, and allowed herself a small, private smile. The fire of anger still burned, but now it was tempered with purpose. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was planning, calculating, preparing. And when the time came, the people who had wronged her would see that she was no longer powerless. Amina turned back into the house, closing the door behind her. The sunlight that had been so gentle before now seemed to illuminate her path with harsh clarity. Her hands shook slightly, but her mind was steady. She would uncover every lie, expose every betrayal, and reclaim her life piece by piece. Shamim had thought she was just lazy. Rolf had thought she was oblivious. They were both about to learn that under silence and patience, a storm had been brewing, a storm that would not be contained. That day, Amina realized something crucial. Revenge was not just about payback. It was about taking control of the narrative, about refusing to let others define her, about reclaiming dignity in a world that had tried to strip it away. The journey ahead would be painful, difficult, and morally complex. But she was ready. And deep inside, she knew this was only the beginning. The days that followed Shamim's unannounced visit were tense and heavy, each moment feeling like a weight pressing down on Amina's chest. Every creak of the floorboard, every unexpected knock at the door, made her heart race. She moved through the house with a constant awareness, as if her walls had ears and eyes. Shamim's presence lingered even in her absence, a shadow that reminded her of the judgment and intrusion she had endured. Amina tried to carry on with her daily life, but every mundane task, washing dishes, folding laundry, preparing meals, felt like a performance under an invisible spotlight. She found herself replaying Shamim's words over and over, dissecting each syllable, each tone, searching for hidden meaning. Lazy, irresponsible, not doing enough. The accusations were simple, yet their impact dug deep. Amina wasn't lazy. She had been carrying the emotional burden of betrayal in silence. She had been patient, careful, always trying to maintain harmony in a house that had suddenly become uncertain. But patience, she realized, had its limits. Betrayal demanded action, and the seed of revenge had already been planted. Amina spent her nights awake, staring at the ceiling, plotting. Quietly, she didn't want to act impulsively. She needed precision, strategy, proof. Every late-night message she had discovered on Rolf's phone, every evasive excuse, every lie he had whispered to hide his actions became ammunition. She documented everything meticulously, screenshots, call logs, notes about times and dates. She was building a map of deception, a record that could not be ignored. Shamim's visits did not cease. Each one was unannounced, always accompanied by a lecture, always making Amina feel like she was under inspection. "You really should wake up earlier," Shamim would say, leaning against the kitchen counter. "Rolf works so hard and someone has to make sure things are running properly here." Other times, she would comment on the house, the meals, or the way Amina spoke. Every word, every gesture was calculated to remind Amina that she was being watched. At first, Amina tried to ignore it. She nodded, smiled politely, and avoided confrontation. But inside, her anger coiled tighter with each visit. It wasn't just the constant scrutiny. It was the realization that Shamim had been misled, that Rolf had spun a version of events that painted Amina as careless and lazy. He had manipulated the narrative, making her the scapegoat for his mistakes. That revelation made her blood boil. Amina began to understand that revenge wasn't just a desire. It was becoming a necessity. Not a violent, destructive revenge, but a measured, deliberate one. A way to restore her dignity and expose the truth. She didn't want to humiliate Shamim unnecessarily, nor did she want to crush Rolf's life. She wanted accountability. She wanted recognition that she had been wronged, and she wanted to reclaim her own narrative. Her mind became a constant whirlwind of what-ifs and how to do it. She considered confronting Rolf directly, but she knew that would be reactive, emotional. She needed leverage. She needed evidence. Every day she built her case, organizing messages, creating timelines, piecing together the puzzle of his deceit. The more she uncovered, the more she realized how carefully he had hidden his actions. The anger inside her shifted into sharp focus. She wasn't just angry. She was meticulous, analytical, strategic. The psychological toll was immense. Amina felt a constant tension between her desire for justice and her moral compass. She was not naturally vengeful. She valued integrity, honesty, and fairness. Yet betrayal had forced her into a position where moral decisions were no longer straightforward. Could she reveal Rolf's deception in a way that held him accountable without losing herself in anger? Could she confront Shamim without feeding resentment, without making her own conscience bleed? Each scenario played out in her mind. She imagined Shamim's shocked face when confronted with the truth, her voice trembling as she realized she had judged Amina unfairly. She imagined Rolf trying to explain himself, stumbling over words, caught in the web of his own lies. The possibilities thrilled her, scared her, and fueled her resolve all at once. She knew she needed to wait for the right moment, a moment where everything would be clear and undeniable. Patience, she realized, was now a weapon. Amina's daily routine became a delicate balance between normalcy and preparation. She continued her chores, smiled when necessary, and maintained a calm exterior, all while planning meticulously. She knew that if she let her emotions show, her strategy could be compromised. Shamim, with her sharp eyes and keen intuition, could detect hesitation or weakness. Rolf, on the other hand, would panic if he sensed suspicion. The more composed Amina appeared, the stronger her position became. The tension escalated one afternoon when she overheard Rolf on a call, speaking in hushed tones to the woman he had been hiding his communication with. His words confirmed everything she had suspected. The betrayal was deeper than she had imagined, extending beyond occasional messages into consistent emotional deception. The anger inside her intensified, but alongside it, a cold, calculating resolve solidified. She realized she had a choice: act impulsively and risk chaos, or act strategically and ensure the truth could not be denied. Amina chose strategy. She began compiling everything into an organized sequence, noting patterns, dates, and inconsistencies. Every lie Rolf had told, every manipulation he had attempted, became a piece of a puzzle that would soon fit perfectly. She was careful, thorough, relentless. Each detail she recorded felt like a step toward justice, a step toward reclaiming her dignity. She could feel the tension in her body, the thrill of anticipation, and yet a strange calm settled over her. She was no longer the passive victim. She was a force in her own right. Shamim continued her unannounced visits, each one intensifying the emotional pressure. "You should be more proactive," she said one morning, her tone casual but cutting. "Rolf can't always manage everything alone." Amina smiled politely, but inside she felt the fire of determination. She realized that Shamim's constant monitoring was unwittingly providing her with insight. Each comment, each observation was data. Each judgment was a window into how the deception had been perceived. Amina was learning, adapting, refining her approach. The internal conflict was relentless. Every night she wrestled with questions of morality and consequence. Was it fair to expose Rolf? Would she feel satisfied or hollow afterward? Could she maintain compassion while seeking justice? The desire for revenge was strong, but so was the awareness that actions had consequences. She understood that the path she was on required precision, patience, and emotional control. Impulsiveness could ruin everything she had planned. One evening, as she sat in the quiet of her home, Amina reflected on the transformation she had undergone. Betrayal had shattered her trust, but it had also awakened a strength she hadn't known she possessed. Her mind, once clouded with doubt and hurt, was now sharp, calculating, and purposeful. She had discovered that revenge was not merely about retaliation. It was about reclaiming control, asserting one's truth, and restoring personal power. The anticipation grew daily. She imagined the moment when Shamim would see the truth, when Rolf would be confronted with the undeniable evidence. She didn't crave destruction. She craved clarity and accountability. She visualized their reactions: shock, confusion, perhaps regret, but also the eventual resolution. Her plan was not born of malice, but of a deep need for justice. And that distinction gave her both clarity and calm. As the days passed, Amina realized that revenge was no longer an abstract idea. It was a tangible path she was preparing to walk. She understood the stakes, the emotional burden, and the moral weight of her actions. But she also understood that doing nothing was no longer an option. She had been wronged, misjudged, and humiliated, and she would not allow the deception to continue unchecked. By the end of the second week, her plan was nearly complete. Evidence organized, emotional strategy rehearsed, and moral framework clarified. Amina felt ready. She had endured scrutiny, isolation, and the gnawing tension of unspoken betrayal. Now, she stood at the threshold of action, poised to step forward with confidence. The journey was far from over, but the foundation had been laid. Amina's world had shifted. Where once she had felt helpless and trapped under Shamim's judgment and Rof's lies, she now felt empowered. The fire of anger had transformed into a steady, focused determination. She was ready to confront the betrayal, to reclaim her narrative, and to seek justice, but carefully, deliberately, and without losing herself in the process. The next confrontation would come soon. She could feel it in her bones, in the rhythm of her days, in the quiet moments where anticipation hummed like electricity. She would not be caught off guard. She would not be underestimated. And when the moment arrived, everything she had prepared would come into play, and the truth would finally emerge. Amina knew one thing clearly. Revenge was not about rage. It was about reclaiming power, asserting dignity, and refusing to be silenced. And she was ready to take that step, not as a victim, but as a woman who had endured betrayal, learned its lessons, and prepared to act with intelligence, patience, and unshakable resolve. The day Amina had been preparing for arrived quietly, almost unremarkably, but she felt the tension thrumming through her veins like electricity. Shamim, as usual, had arrived without notice, her shoes tapping softly on the wooden floor. Her presence carried authority, scrutiny, and that familiar undercurrent of judgment. Amina watched her approach, her face calm, her mind precise. She had rehearsed this moment countless times, visualized it in detail, and now it was finally here. "Good morning," Shamim said, her tone neutral but laced with expectation. "We need to talk about your behavior. Rauf is worried and Sit." Amina interrupted, her voice low but firm, carrying a confidence that immediately halted Shamim mid-sentence. The older woman blinked, surprised at the sudden command. Slowly, she lowered herself onto the sofa, her eyes narrowing as she tried to gauge the change in Amina's demeanor. Amina placed her phone on the coffee table, the device a silent herald of the truth it contained. She met Shamim's gaze steadily, her voice calm but charged with authority. "You think I'm the problem? You think I'm lazy, careless, or ungrateful? But you only know one version of the truth. His version." Shamim's expression flickered with confusion. Her brow furrowed. "What are you saying?" she asked, a trace of defensiveness creeping in. "I'm saying that Rauf has lied to you. He has twisted the truth, manipulated your perception, and painted me as the one at fault," Amina said, her hand lifting the phone and scrolling through the messages. Each screen displayed Rauf's hidden conversations, his excuses, his deception. Shamim's eyes widened as she began to understand, the color draining from her face. Amina watched carefully, noting every micro-expression, the shock, the hesitation, the dawning realization. She had expected some denial, some defensiveness, but Shamim's reaction was immediate. She didn't argue. She didn't deflect. The evidence was undeniable, and her mother-in-law's self-assured authority faltered. "You." I didn't." No, Shamim whispered finally, her voice trembling. Guilt, confusion, and embarrassment blended into one fragile tone. He told me you were distant, that you weren't trying, that you were lazy. Amina's lips pressed together. This was the moment she had envisioned, the moment where years of manipulation and betrayal collided with the undeniable truth. She could have let her anger erupt, shouted accusations, destroyed facades. But she realized that revenge was not about causing pain for satisfaction. It was about reclaiming her own dignity. I didn't show you this to hurt you, Amina said calmly. I showed you because I need you to stop blaming me for things I didn't do. I am not lazy. I am not careless. I am not ungrateful. And I will not allow deception to dictate how I am treated. Shamim looked down at her hands, trembling slightly. Amina noticed the tension in her shoulders, the shift in her posture. For the first time, Shamim appeared vulnerable, human, and fallible. The woman who had seemed so powerful, so certain, now carried the weight of shock and regret. I should have questioned him, Shamim admitted finally, her voice small. I should have listened to you. I let his words replace my judgment. I'm sorry. The apology hung in the air, heavy yet sincere. Amina allowed herself a momentary sigh of relief. She had expected confrontation, but she hadn't anticipated the raw vulnerability that came with Shamim's acknowledgement. The tension in the room shifted. It no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like a moment of reckoning, a crossing, point where truth and understanding intersected. Amina's mind now turned to Rauf, the man whose betrayal had triggered this entire sequence. She had prepared for him meticulously, organizing every message, every lie, every omission. When he returned home that evening, she was ready. She didn't wait for confrontation to build tension. She met him directly, her demeanor composed, her voice steady. Rauf, she said simply, we need to talk. He looked at her, surprised by the calm intensity in her eyes. He had expected anger, shouting, perhaps even tears. Instead, he faced a quiet determination that was far more unsettling. He opened his mouth to speak, but she held up the phone, displaying the documented evidence of his deception. His face went pale, and the words he had rehearsed dissolved in his throat. This is everything, Amina said. All the lies, the messages, the manipulations. I know the truth. I have proof, and I need you to make a choice. Honesty or separation. I will not tolerate further deceit. Rauf's hands shook slightly as he reached for the phone, but Amina pulled it back gently, maintaining control. No explanations until you choose to be truthful. You need to decide if you want to earn back trust, or if this ends here. The silence that followed was electric. It stretched and tightened the room, charged with emotion and consequence. Rauf finally exhaled, swallowing hard. I don't know if I can fix this, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I made mistakes. I betrayed you. I want to make it right, but I don't know how. Amina's expression softened slightly, but her resolve did not waver. Then you start by being honest, every step of the way. No more lies. No more excuses. That is the only path forward. Anything less, and this ends. She realized in that moment that revenge, in its traditional sense, would have been easy. She could have unleashed all her anger, publicly humiliated him, destroyed his carefully constructed world. But what would that have accomplished? Satisfaction, yes, but at the cost of her own integrity. She understood now that true power lay in restraint, in clarity, in controlling the narrative without descending into chaos. Shamim, who had been quietly observing, now looked on with a mixture of guilt and relief. Her judgment had faltered. Yes, but Amina's composure had transformed the confrontation into a lesson, not a punishment. She had exposed the truth, reclaimed her dignity, and maintained her moral compass. It was more satisfying than rage, more powerful than humiliation. The evening ended not with screams or recriminations, but with a tentative acknowledgement of reality. Wrath had no easy answers, no instant redemption, only the opportunity to choose honesty and rebuild the trust he had shattered. Shamim had no harsh words left, only a quiet understanding that her assumptions had caused pain. And Amina, for the first time in weeks, felt a deep sense of relief. She had endured scrutiny, betrayal, and emotional pressure, yet she had emerged intact, controlled, and empowered. In the following days, Shamim's unannounced visits stopped. When she came, she called first. Her tone was softer, her observations less judgmental. She had learned that Amina was not lazy, careless, or weak, but someone capable of immense strength and moral clarity. Rauf, meanwhile, began the slow, arduous process of rebuilding trust. Every honest conversation, every acknowledgement of past mistakes was a step toward a fragile reconciliation, one built on accountability rather than pretense. Amina reflected on everything that had happened. Revenge, she realized, was not about inflicting pain or asserting dominance. It was about reclaiming agency, asserting truth, and standing firm in the face of betrayal. She could have destroyed Rauf and Shamim in moments of rage, that would have left her hollow, trapped in bitterness. Instead, she had chosen clarity, patience, and strategic action. Her mind returned to the lessons learned. Patience amplifies power, truth is stronger than deception, and dignity is preserved not through vengeance, but through intentional, morally conscious action. She had faced betrayal, manipulation, and humiliation, and emerged not as a victim, but as a woman who commanded her own narrative. Even in quiet moments, she felt the residual tension, the knowledge that the wounds of betrayal were not instantly healed and that the consequences of actions lingered. But she also felt a sense of empowerment, an understanding that she could navigate the complexities of morality, justice, and personal integrity. In the end, Amina's journey was not about revenge in the traditional sense. It was about reclaiming herself. It was about turning betrayal into clarity, humiliation into strength, and anger into purpose. She had faced the crossroads of rage and reason, chosen the latter, and discovered a form of victory that was profound, lasting, and holy. Her own as the sun set over the city, casting a warm glow through the windows, Amina sat quietly in her living room. She felt the weight of the past weeks lift slightly, replaced by a sense of control and moral equilibrium. She had learned that true satisfaction was not found in punishment, but in reclaiming one's agency and refusing to be defined by the lies or judgments of others. And in that quiet, deliberate moment, she understood something essential. Revenge could destroy, yes, but restraint, clarity, and truth built something far stronger. She had chosen the latter, and that choice, she knew, would guide her for the rest of her life.